All right, we're gonna do this much faster this time. Okay, so we're gonna go with the retail item, cool beans. Um, let's do the Windows P. We're gonna do Alt Tab. It's a whole bunch of stuff. It's my GitHub. It's my Unity Hub because I panicked when I saw that it was due tonight and not tomorrow. Cool. So the retail item has the string, an int, a double for the description, units on hand, and price respectively. We have an empty constructor. We have a public retail parameterized constructor with string description, int, units on hand, and a double for price. All that, so it pass in, and we can set those as we create it and initialize it. Cool beans, cool. Then we have setters for each of those respectively. Set description, set units, set price. We also have getters for get description, get units, and get price. We also have a clean print function for all that. All that comes in handy except the get units. We don't really need that. And moving on. So then in this one, what we're doing is I like to have an array list as we create each of those, which the information comes from the prompt of the project. We create those each individually, and then we add it to the list, and then I step through with the list, and then I use that print item to print it all beautifully. So we pass in, for example, we pass in the jacket to the description, then units on hand, and then the price, 59.95, and then we print that as we step through the list, and it looks something like this. Cool. Boom, item, description, units, bam, 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 bam. Cool. And forgive me if I'm talking fast. The last one was like 16 minutes. I'm trying to make it much faster than that. Cool. Cash register. Moving on. This will accept a retail item. This will accept a quantity for that retail item. An empty constructor as well, and then parameterized constructor, which we can set the retail item and the quantity on initialization. Cool. Setters / mutators to set the item and the set quantity or adjust it as needed on the fly or dynamically, whichever you want to call it. And then getters, so we can return the item and play with it. And then we can also, with this, when we return this item, we then can access these functions within the item. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. We then can also, we're also getting the quantity, so we can do maths with it later on. And we can print it and do a lot of excess stuff. Anyway, we're getting the subtotal by multiplying the quantity by the item get price. See, we're using it right there. We can access the get price by that item. We're getting the tax by getting the subtotal. We're calling that function and then multiplying that by 6%, which is 0.06. And then we're getting the total by getting subtotal plus get tax. Excellent. We're keeping these public because we will use those for prints later and for printing to file in the sales receipt, but we'll talk about that later on. Print, just another clean print function so that we can make sure everything's working and make sure everything's clean. We want to use it right here. So item, get description. We want to string format, item, get price, all that good stuff right here so it's clean. In this, I'm just creating scanner input, obviously, so we can get input. Anyway, retail item, we're using the first from the 3 examples earlier. We're going to ask the user how many of the jackets in this example, how many of the jackets were sold. We're going to use that, do a little input validation, and then use that item and the quantity from input to then print the register information and data from that. Saying all that to say, this is what it looks like. How many jackets were sold? We're going to say 5, and we're going to run with that. I will check math later on at the end just so we can keep moving, but I've checked it 10 times, so trust me, it's right. The sales receipt, this has one job and one job only. This is going to take the register information that we have passed into it and print it to a file, or write it to a file, to use the correct the correct terms. Now, there was a bit of confusion on my end because in the prompt it says use a retail item, but and I'll show you what I mean because I was trying to get some validation on this, and I'll do this really quickly. It says that to use with a retail item, but it says get the unit price, which is fine, but then also says the subtotal and the tax. Now, the way that it was written seemed very ambiguous, like it was supposed to use the register. And the way it was building on itself from part A to B and then kind of B to C, I took it as this might have been a typo. So, but I couldn't get any validation on that. So that's kind of what I ran with. And I think this shows um, vast understanding with it. I hope I don't get points off. Fingers crossed. Anyway, this is how I did it. I hope it's okay. Moving on. So we're going to take this cash register, we're going to pass it in, and we're going to use it to print our file. Now, what's interesting is we use file, file writer, and print writer, and this is why. First, we're doing a try block saying we're going to try all this. If not, we're going to catch it with an exception error, and we're going to print the error to the print stack, and figure out what we're wrong. Anyway, moving on, we're going to create a new file object, and this is the path that we're going to tell it to go. We're going to tell it to print, get the parent directory, and if none of that is okay, and if we can't create the directory, we're going to create the directory if it doesn't exist. If none of that happens, okay, we're just going to error out and figure out what went wrong. Anyway, we're going to create, from that file object we created, we're going to create a file writer and pass that into a print writer. What print writer does is it's kind of like a file writer like system out, which is really nifty and perfect for this specific instance. The way from what I looked up. Anyway, moving on. The register object will help us get the item, get description, which is a little bit fancier than what the prompt asked for, but I like the way it looked. Anyway, we're going to get the description, get the price, get the quantity, get the subtotal, get the tax, get the total, and then say thank you for shopping like most receipts do. So this is exactly how it's going to look. So imagine the print line isn't there, and this is how it's going to look exactly. Doing all that, what I wanted to do was kind of make it look like you're actually interacting with somebody. So we're going to give them an option of the initial three options of the jacket, designer, jeans, and shirt. We're going to ask them which of the items are you purchasing? One for the jacket, two for the designer, three for the shirt. Then we're going to have some input validation. We're going to send it through an if else 1 through 3. That's going to determine which one it is, depending on their input. We're going to ask them for the quantity of how much they want to buy. We're going to use that selected item and the quantity to create the cash register object, and then use that cash register object to then create the receipt object to call the method to write to file. Using all of that, this is what it looks like. So we're going to say shirt, say we want to buy 5 shirts, and it looks like this. See item shirt, $24.95, 5, and then all that math. Excellent. Now, the last one, even though this, yes, it was working all together, I still wanted to follow the prompt and show them all working together in a different way with a bunch of different print options to show them, vividly working together. So what I wanted to do is have the user create their own retail item. So that's what I do. I prompt them, create a new retail item for system with a description, some validation, the stock, some validation, price, some validation, and then they create the retail item with those variables. We print that with the information to make sure it's correct and it works. We then have how many did the customer buy, use that item that we just created, that item and the quantity that we just asked for. We need some validation right here. I just forgot. Cool. I'll put that in a second. And then we're using that to then print the register, and then using the register to write to file. So all that looks like this. Let's say blue jeans, stock, let's say 5, price $19.99. Blue jeans 5, how many did the customer buy? Let's say 5. Cool. And then receipt, $19.95, $19.95, $6. Excellent.